You are 23 years old and you are cutting meat. The butcher shop on Mulberry Street belongs to your Uncle Enzo, and you have worked here since you were 15, learning how to separate muscle from bone with a single clean stroke. It is a Tuesday in November, cold enough that your breath clouds when customers open the front door, and you are halfway through breaking down a side of pork when three men walk in. Two of them you have never seen before. The third is Carmine Ferrante, a man whose name your uncle has mentioned only in whispers, always followed by the sign of the cross. Carmine does not look at the display case, he looks at you. He tells your uncle to close the shop. Your uncle does not argue. He locks the front door, pulls the shade, and disappears into the back without a word. Carmine sits on the wooden stool by the register and tells you that his nephew, Marco, owed money to a crew in Brooklyn, $60,000. Marco could not pay, so Marco was found in the trunk of his own car in a parking garage in Red Hook, 3 days dead in the August heat. The men responsible operate out of a social club on 4th Avenue. Carmine has their names, he has their routines. What he does not have is someone to do the work, because the man who usually handles such things is currently in a federal detention center awaiting trial. Carmine looks at you for a long time before speaking again. He tells you that he has watched you since you were a boy. He tells you that he knows about the fight outside the Feast of San Gennaro when you were 17, how you put a grown man on the pavement with a single hip and did not panic, did not run, just stood there with steady hands while everyone else scattered. He tells you that your uncle talks about your discipline, your patience, the way you can stand for 6 hours over a cutting board without losing focus. He asks you if you understand what he is asking you to do. You understand. You tell him you've never fired a gun. He smiles, and there is nothing warm in it. He says that is exactly why he chose you, a man with no record, no connections, no history. Clean. He gives you an envelope. Inside is a photograph of two men standing outside a social club, a set of car keys, and $4,000 in $100 bills. He says if you do this, your uncle's rent disappears forever, and you will never need to worry about money again. He also says, without any change in his tone, that there is no version of this conversation where you simply say no and go back to cutting pork. You look at the photograph. You look at your hands, still flecked with blood from the butcher's work. You put the envelope in your coat pocket.
3 weeks later, you were sitting in a borrowed Buick on 4th Avenue at 11:40 at night. It has taken you 21 days to learn the target's patterns. The taller one, Sal, leaves the social club every night between 11:30 and midnight. He always walks to his car alone. He parks in the same spot, 3 blocks east, under a broken streetlight that the city has not repaired in months. The second man, Dino, leaves 30 minutes later and drives in the opposite direction. You have watched this happen 14 consecutive nights. Carmine's people gave you a revolver, a .38 with a serial number filed away. You practiced in a basement in Staten Island with a retired capo named Giulio, who taught you how to hold the weapon, how to control your breathing, how to squeeze rather than pull. Giulio said you were a natural, that your hands were the steadiest he had seen in 40 years. You did not feel steady. You felt like the floor was tilting beneath you every time you held the gun. But the shots went where you aimed them, every single time, and that is the only thing that matters now. Sal exits the social club at 11:43. He walks east. You step out of the car and follow on the opposite side of the street, matching his pace. When he reaches his car and bends to unlock the door, you cross. You are 6 feet away when he hears your footsteps and begins to turn. You fire twice. Both rounds hit center mass. He drops against the car and slides to the ground. You stand over him and fire once more. Then you walk back to the Buick, drive 4 blocks, leave it in a parking garage where Carmine's people will handle it, and take the subway home. You are in bed by 1:15 in the morning. Your hands are not shaking. You wait for the shaking to start. It does not.
Dino takes longer. Carmine decides to wait 3 months so the connection is harder to draw. During that time, you continue working in the butcher shop. You wake up at 5, cut meat until 3, eat dinner with your uncle, and go to bed. Nothing changes except the weight inside your chest, which is new and permanent and settles deeper each morning when you look at your face in the bathroom mirror. You do not feel guilt exactly. You feel a kind of heavy awareness. as if the air around you has thickened and will never thin again. When the 3 months pass, you handle Dino in a parking structure in Bay Ridge. One shot through the driver's side window while he sits behind the wheel fumbling with his phone. You disappear into the stairwell and out the back exit. The next morning, Carmine sends a man to the butcher shop with an envelope containing $20,000 and a message. You are now on retainer. Over the next 2 years, you complete 7 more contracts. Each one is cleaner than the last, not because you are becoming more comfortable, but because you are becoming more precise. Comfort has nothing to do with it. Every job still produces the same sensation, a cold weight in your stomach that lasts for days, a metallic taste in your mouth that arrives the moment before you pull the trigger and lingers for hours after. What changes is your process. You learn to surveil for a minimum of 3 weeks before acting. You learn which neighborhoods have cameras and which do not, which intersections have traffic monitors, which subway stations have broken turnstiles that let you pass without swiping a card. You learn to steal cars from long-term airport parking lots because the owners will not notice for days. You learn to wrap your shoes in plastic bags and discard them in separate dumpsters afterward. You learn that the hardest part is never the act itself, but the hours before it, the waiting, the sitting alone in a dark car while your mind tries to construct reasons to walk away, and the hours after it, the silence in your apartment while the rest of the city sleeps and you lie awake tracing the crack in your ceiling with your eyes. No one teaches you how to survive that part. You figure it out on your own. Or rather, you figure out that you cannot survive it, only endure it. And that endurance becomes its own form of discipline. By your 3rd year, Carmine begins sending you outside New York. A restaurant owner in Philadelphia who has been cooperating with the FBI, a union official in Boston who skimmed from a construction fund that belonged to people who do not tolerate skimming, a retired enforcer in Miami who, in his old age, has started writing letters to a federal prosecutor. Each job pays between $30,000 and $50,000. You open a savings account under a false name and deposit small amounts in cash. You buy nothing that draws attention. You continue to work in the butcher shop because it provides a reason to exist in the neighborhood, a daily rhythm that anchors you to a life that looks ordinary from the outside. Your uncle never asks about the nights you come home late. He never asks about the money. The only acknowledgement is the way he sometimes looks at you across the cutting table with an expression that falls between sorrow and resignation, and the fact that he has started attending Mass every morning instead of once a week. By year 5, your reputation within the organization has calcified into something you did not seek and cannot control. They call you Il Preciso, the precise one, a name you first hear whispered at a funeral for a capo who died of a heart attack, one of the few members of your world who managed to leave it through natural causes. The name follows you into rooms before you enter them. Men who once ignored you now nod with a deference that borders on fear. Women connected to the families look at you with a curiosity that carries an edge of horror, as if they are trying to understand what kind of man you are by studying your face. You give them nothing to study. You have become expert at stillness, at flatness, at projecting a calm so complete that people stop trying to read you and simply accept the blank surface. This is not strategy. It is the truth. The person you were at 23, the one who felt the air thicken and the weight settle in his chest, has been slowly replaced by someone who functions with mechanical efficiency. You eat, you sleep, you work, you execute. Somewhere beneath the machinery, the original version of you still exists, but you have buried him so deep that his voice reaches you only in dreams, and you've trained yourself to forget your dreams by the time you finish your first cup of coffee. The turning point arrives in your 7th year. Carmine summons you to a house in Staten Island, a large colonial on a quiet street lined with oak trees. Inside, seated around a dining table covered with newspapers and coffee cups, are 4 men you recognize as ranking members of the family. Carmine introduces the situation without preamble. There is a problem in Chicago. A Calabrian crew operating in the western suburbs has been undercutting the family's heroin supply chain, not through direct competition, but by bribing a key distribution contact to redirect product. The family in New York has diplomatic ties to the Chicago outfit, and those ties prevent an open war. What they need is a surgical action. One man removed. Luca Ferretti, the Calabrian crew's logistics chief, who operates out of a dry cleaning business in Berwyn, Illinois. They need it done quietly, with no trace, and they need it done within 10 days because a shipment worth $2 million is at stake. The payment is $100,000. You sit at that table and listen and calculate. You have never operated in Chicago. You have no local knowledge, no escape routes, no safe houses. 10 days is too short for your usual surveillance protocol. Everything about this job violates the principles that have kept you alive and free for 7 years. You say yes, because saying no at this level is not really an option, and because the $100,000 represents enough to begin planning an exit that you have been fantasizing about for the past 18 months. A quiet disappearance to a country without extradition, a new name, a life that does not require you to forget your dreams every morning. You fly to Chicago under a false identity and check into a motel in Cicero. Over 6 days, you learn everything you can about Luca Ferretti. He is 54 years old, heavyset, a creature of habit. He arrives at the dry cleaning business at 9 every morning and leaves at 6. He eats lunch at the same Italian restaurant 3 blocks away, always at a table by the window, always alone. He drives a black Lincoln Town Car and parks it in a small lot behind the building. On the 7th day, you notice something that changes everything. Ferretti's 10-year-old daughter is dropped off at the dry cleaning business every afternoon at 3:30 by a school bus. She sits in the back office doing homework until her father closes the shop and drives her home. Your original plan was to approach Ferretti in the parking lot at 6 o'clock. If the girl is with him, you cannot act. You spend 2 days recalculating. On the 9th day, you follow Ferretti at lunch. He walks to the restaurant, sits by the window, and orders. You enter, sit at the counter, and wait. When he finishes and walks out, you follow him into the alley behind the building, the one he uses as a shortcut back to the shop. The alley is empty. You close the distance in 3 strides. He turns at the sound of your shoes on the gravel. You fire once. He falls. You check his pulse, retrieve the casing, and exit through the far end of the alley onto a residential street where a rented car is waiting. By the time his body is found, you are on a train to Detroit, and by the following morning, you are back in New York cutting pork as if nothing in the world has changed. But something has changed, and it takes weeks for you to identify what it is. The girl. You have seen children before during surveillance, have factored their presence into your planning as a logistical variable, a scheduling complication. This time is different. This time, you find yourself lying awake at 3 in the morning imagining the moment when that girl learns her father is not coming home. You see her sitting in the back office with her homework, waiting. You see the door opening and someone entering who is not her father, and the look on her face when she understands. You cannot stop the image from cycling. It plays on a loop behind your eyes, immune to every technique of suppression you have developed over 7 years. For the first time, the buried version of yourself, the 23-year-old who felt the air thicken, pushes through the machinery and speaks clearly enough that you cannot pretend you did not hear him. He tells you that what you have become is not sustainable. He tells you that the accumulation of what you have done is a debt that compounds interest every day, and that the payment, when it comes, will not be financial. You begin planning your exit. You have saved nearly $600,000 across multiple accounts. You research countries. You study passport forgery. You make contact through an intermediary with a man in Buenos Aires who specializes in relocating people who need to stop existing. The cost is $150,000 for a complete package: documents, history, a furnished apartment, an introduction to a local economy. You set a date, 14 months from now, the spring after next. You will work the butcher shop until then, accept no more contracts, and fade from Carmine's world gradually enough that your absence looks like retirement rather than flight. But the world you inhabit does not allow gradual exits. Carmine calls you 3 months into your withdrawal. There is a new contract. A federal witness in the Eastern District of New York, a man named Anthony Pesci, who has agreed to testify against 3 members of the family's leadership. Pesci is in protective custody, but Carmine's sources have identified a window, a transfer between safe houses in 2 weeks. The payment is $200,000. You decline. You tell Carmine you were tired, that you need time. Carmine's voice on the phone does not change pitch or pace. He tells you that tired is not a category that applies to your situation. He tells you that your work over 7 years has given you a good life, and that good lives are maintained through continued usefulness. He does not threaten you. He does not need to. You understand the architecture of the world you inhabit well enough to know that a man who stops being useful begins being considered a liability, and that liabilities in this world have a short shelf life. You take the Pesci contract. You execute it with the same precision that has defined every job you have done, intercepting the witness during a transfer in a parking garage in downtown Brooklyn, 2 shots from a suppressed pistol, both fatal, followed by an exit through a fire door and a 5-block walk to a subway station. The FBI launches an investigation that dominates the news for weeks. A federal witness killed under protection. Congressional hearings are announced. The pressure on the family intensifies, and with it, the pressure on you, because now you are the only person alive outside the family's leadership who knows the details of the most high-profile assassination in organized crime in a decade. You realize with the clarity that feels like ice water in your veins that your exit plan is no longer a matter of comfort or preference. It is a matter of survival. The family will eventually conclude that you are a loose end. The only question is when. You accelerate. You contact the man in Buenos Aires and move the timeline up. You begin liquidating accounts. You pack a single bag with documents, cash, and nothing sentimental, because sentimentality is a luxury that belongs to a version of you that stopped existing years ago. You tell your uncle you are going away for a while. He looks at you across the cutting table and nods. His eyes are wet, but his hands are steady. And you think, not for the first time, that steadiness might be the only thing the men in your family know how to pass down. On the night before your departure, you sit alone in your apartment in the dark. The city hums outside your window, indifferent to you and to everything you have done within its borders. You have killed 14 men over 7 years. You know their names, their faces, the sounds they made. This information is stored in a part of your brain that you cannot access voluntarily, but that opens without permission in the small hours of the morning, cataloging details you never wanted to retain: the color of a man's shirt, the way another one reached for a wall as he fell, the sound of breath stopping. You are 30 years old. You have more money than you will need for a decade. You have a plane ticket to a city where no one knows your name, and a new identity waiting in a safe deposit box. You have every material component of freedom. And yet you understand, sitting in that dark apartment, that the person boarding that plane tomorrow is not free and will never be free, because freedom requires the ability to set down what you are carrying, and you are carrying 14 men who will ride with you to Buenos Aires and to wherever you go after that, their weight distributed evenly across every remaining day of your life. You stand up. You check the bag. You check the documents. You set the alarm for 4:30 in the morning. Then you lie down in the dark and wait for the dreams you will spend the rest of your life trying to forget.